Commander Jake Morrison stood at the main control panel of Blackwood Station and stared at the empty screens in front of him. For 3 days now, every communication channel had been silent. The usual chatter from alien traders, diplomatic messages from the Zephyrian Empire, and even the angry threats from pirate gangs had all stopped at once. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and checked the time again. 72 hours of complete silence from the entire galaxy. Lieutenant Amy Carter sat at her communication station and tried the emergency frequencies one more time. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls as she sent out distress signals on every known channel. The response was always the same, nothing but empty static. Amy had been trying to reach someone, anyone, for 3 straight days without sleep. Her coffee cup sat empty beside her, forgotten hours ago. The station's automated systems continued their normal routine, but the crew knew something was terribly wrong. Blackwood Station sat at the edge of human space, designed to monitor alien activity and serve as an early warning system. In 20 years of operation, they had never experienced a complete communication blackout like this. Even during the worst conflicts, some signals always got through. Dr. Lisa Grant walked into the command center carrying a stack of data files. She had been reviewing all the intelligence reports from the past month, looking for any clue about what might have caused this silence. Lisa set the files down on Jake's desk and pointed to several marked pages. The reports showed strange sightings near the outer colonies, ships that appeared and disappeared without warning, always near areas where space seemed darker than usual. Jake picked up one of the reports and read it carefully. 3 weeks ago, miners on the frontier world of New Dakota had reported seeing massive ships emerge from what looked like empty space. The ships were unlike anything in the human database. Sleek and black with no visible engines or weapon ports, they had appeared for less than an hour before vanishing again, leaving only strange energy readings that the miners' equipment could barely detect. Amy suddenly straightened in her chair and called out to Jake. Her sensors had picked up a fast-approaching ship coming from the direction of Earth. The vessel was broadcasting human identification codes and requesting immediate docking permission. Jake authorized the landing and sent security teams to the docking bay. Within minutes, Captain Ben Hughes stepped off the transport ship carrying a sealed briefcase and wearing the grim expression of someone bringing bad news. Ben walked directly to Jake's office and sealed the door behind them. He opened the briefcase and pulled out classified documents marked with the highest security clearances. The papers contained information that made Jake's blood run cold. Deep space telescopes throughout human territory had detected massive energy signatures moving through what scientists called dark matter streams. These signatures were artificial, controlled, and heading toward inhabited systems throughout the galaxy. The documents showed pictures taken by the most powerful telescopes Earth had ever built. Strange objects moved through space in formations that suggested intelligence and purpose. They seemed to use the dark matter that filled empty space as highways, traveling at speeds that should have been impossible. Most disturbing of all, wherever these objects had passed, all communication from alien civilizations had stopped. Lisa studied the telescope images with growing concern. The objects in the pictures were clearly ships, but their design was unlike anything any known species had ever built. They appeared to be made of some material that bent light around them, making them difficult to see even with the best equipment. She estimated that each ship was at least 10 times larger than humanity's biggest warships. Ben explained that Earth Command had been tracking these mysterious ships for weeks. At first, they thought it might be some new alien species making contact. But as more and more civilizations went silent, the truth became clear. This was not a peaceful first contact situation. This was something much worse. Amy called out from her station that she was detecting new energy readings. Her instruments showed massive disturbances in the dark matter around several nearby star systems. The readings were similar to what the telescopes had been seeing, but much closer to human space. Whatever was causing the galactic silence was moving in their direction. Jake looked at the tactical display and saw the truth that chilled him to his core. The energy signatures were arranged in a pattern that could only be a military formation. Hundreds of objects were moving through dark matter streams, coordinating their movements with precision. that suggested advanced intelligence. They were heading directly for the most populated human colonies. The command center's alarm systems suddenly activated. Long-range sensors had detected something massive emerging from a dark matter cloud near the galactic center. The computer struggled to process the size of what it was seeing. The object was larger than anything that should be able to exist, a construct the size of a small moon, bristling with unknown technology. More alarms joined the first as sensors throughout the station detected dozens of similar objects appearing across the galaxy. They seemed to materialize out of nothing, as if they had been hiding in the dark matter itself. Each object was accompanied by fleets of the smaller ships that the telescopes had been tracking. Lisa ran calculations on her computer and shared her results with the others. Based on the energy readings and movement patterns, these objects had the power to destroy entire star systems. Their technology was so advanced that human weapons might not even be able to damage them. The worst part was that they seemed to be targeting every inhabited world simultaneously. Ben opened another file from his briefcase and showed them intelligence reports from the frontier. Human colonies on the edge of space had been reporting strange phenomena for months. Electronic systems failing without explanation, animals acting strangely, and some people claiming to hear voices in languages that did not exist. All of these reports had come from areas where dark matter concentrations were unusually high. Amy's instruments detected incoming signals on frequencies that human equipment should not have been able to receive. The signals were not random. They showed clear patterns that suggested communication between the mysterious objects. Whatever species was behind this had technology that could manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. Jake realized that humanity was facing a threat, unlike anything in their history. An unknown enemy with impossible technology had somehow eliminated every other intelligent species in the galaxy without anyone even knowing they existed. Now they were coming for humanity, and there was nowhere to run. The station's main display showed the approaching fleet in all its terrible glory. Thousands of ships moved through space like living shadows, phasing in and out of normal reality as they traveled through dark matter streams. They moved with purpose and coordination that spoke of a single controlling intelligence behind them all. As Jake watched the enemy fleet grow larger on his screens, he knew that the age of humanity's innocence was over. The galaxy had gone silent, because something had been hunting in the darkness and now it had found them. Admiral Frank Russell stood on the bridge of the UHS Independence and watched the tactical displays with growing dread. Reports were flooding in from every corner of human space, and none of them brought good news. Every attempt to contact alien civilizations had failed completely. The Zephyrian Empire, humanity's oldest trading partner, had not responded to any messages for 5 days. The Corvin Republic's diplomatic channels were dead. Even the hostile Vex swarm, who never stopped, broadcasting threats and demands, had gone completely silent. The situation reports painted a picture that Frank did not want to believe. Automated monitoring stations along alien borders were shutting down in a clear pattern. Something was systematically destroying or disabling every piece of technology that could transmit signals across interstellar space. The pattern suggested that whatever was doing this knew exactly where every monitoring station was located and was eliminating them with surgical precision. Lieutenant Colonel Kate Sullivan received her mission orders and felt her stomach tighten with worry. She was to take the stealth frigate Shadowhawk to investigate the last known position of Zephyrian Patrol Fleet 7. The fleet had been conducting routine border patrols when all contact was lost 6 days ago. Kate's job was to find out what happened to 12 warships and over 3,000 crew members. The Shadowhawk was humanity's most advanced reconnaissance vessel, equipped with stealth systems that could make it nearly invisible to most sensor types. Kate hoped that would be enough to keep her crew safe as they ventured into what might be a war zone. Her team of specialists included the best intelligence officers and sensor technicians that the human fleet could provide. Dr. Eric Thompson worked frantically in his laboratory on Mars, analyzing the energy signatures that deep space telescopes continued to detect. The readings were unlike anything in human science databases. The mysterious objects seemed to be manipulating dark matter itself, using it as both a source of power and a medium for faster-than-light travel. Eric's calculations suggested that this technology was thousands of years ahead of anything humanity possessed. The energy pattern showed clear signs of artificial control. Whatever was generating these signatures had mastered the fundamental forces of the universe in ways that human scientists had only dreamed about. The implications were staggering. A species with this level of technology could reshape reality itself. Eric documented his findings and transmitted them to military headquarters with the highest priority codes. Kate's mission began badly and got worse as the Shadowhawk approached Zephyrian space. Long-range sensors detected massive debris fields where the patrol fleet should have been. As they moved closer, Kate could see that the debris consisted of twisted metal and crystalline fragments that had once been Zephyrian warships. The destruction was complete and total, leaving nothing larger than a personal transport intact. The Shadowhawk's science officer, Commander Paul Davis, scanned the debris fields with every instrument they had. The readings were confusing and disturbing. The wreckage showed signs of having been destroyed by weapons that attacked matter at the molecular level. The ships had not been blown apart by conventional explosives. They had been dissolved from the inside out. More disturbing than the destruction itself was the complete absence of bodies. Zephyrian crews should have left thousands of remains, but the sensors found no organic material anywhere in the debris field. It was as if the crews had simply vanished, leaving only their ships to be destroyed. Kate ordered her team to collect samples of the strange residue that covered some of the wreckage. Back on Mars, Eric made a breakthrough that changed everything. Analysis of the telescope data revealed that the mysterious objects were not just using dark matter for travel. They were somehow existing partially within dark matter space itself. This explained how they could appear and disappear so suddenly. They were moving between normal space and a parallel dimension that humans had barely begun to understand. The implications of this discovery were frightening. If these objects could phase in and out of normal space at will, they were effectively invisible until they chose to attack. No early warning system could detect them, and no defense could prepare for their arrival. Humanity was facing an enemy that could strike anywhere at any time without warning. Chief Engineer Tony Rodriguez was running routine maintenance on Blackwood Station when his instruments detected something that should not have been possible. Energy readings were appearing on sensors throughout the station, but they were fluctuating in patterns that suggested the source was phasing in and out of existence. Tony called Commander Morrison immediately and recommended going to maximum alert status. Jake Morrison had been expecting this moment ever since Captain Hughes had shown him the classified files. The enemy fleet that had been tracked approaching human space was finally close enough to detect. Jake ordered all station personnel to battle stations and activated the emergency beacon that would warn Earth Command of the impending attack. Objects that emerged from dark matter space around Blackwood Station were unlike anything Jake had ever seen. They appeared to be made of a material that seemed to absorb light, making them difficult to focus on even when looking directly at them. The ships had no visible weapons or engines, but energy readings suggested they were incredibly powerful. Jake counted at least 50 vessels of various sizes, all moving with the coordinated precision of a military formation. Amy Carter tried desperately to establish communication with the approaching fleet. She broadcast on every frequency humans had ever used for first contact situations, offering peaceful greetings in dozens of languages. The response was immediate and terrifying. A signal that seemed to bypass the station's communication systems entirely and spoke directly into the minds of everyone on board. The voice that filled their thoughts was cold and emotionless, speaking in perfect human language despite never having encountered humans before. It told them that their species had been evaluated and found suitable for processing. Resistance would only delay the inevitable outcome. The voice explained that consciousness was a resource that could be harvested and improved through collective integration. Lisa Grant realized with horror that they were facing something far worse than simple conquest. These beings were not interested in destroying humanity. They wanted to absorb human minds into some kind of collective consciousness. The reports from frontier colonies suddenly made sense. People had been hearing voices because their minds were being scanned and evaluated by an intelligence that existed partially outside normal space. The attack began without warning as weapons that seemed to phase through the station's shields struck critical systems throughout Blackwood Station. The weapons did not behave like any known technology. They passed through solid matter as if it did not exist, then became solid again inside their targets. Hull plating dissolved, electronic systems failed, and several crew members simply vanished as if they had never been there. Jake ordered an immediate evacuation of non-essential personnel, while Tony worked frantically to keep the station's main systems operational. The enemy weapons were targeting specific systems with knowledge that suggested they had been studying human technology for a long time. They knew exactly which systems to destroy, to disable the station without completely destroying it. The battle lasted only minutes before Jake realized that conventional resistance was hopeless. The enemy ships could phase in and out of normal space faster than human weapons could track them. Their weapons bypassed every defense that human technology could provide. Blackwood Station was completely outmatched and would be destroyed or captured within hours. In desperation, Jake ordered Tony to overload the station's main reactor in a way that would create a massive explosion. If they were going to lose the station anyway, at least they could take some of the enemy ships with them. Tony began the overload sequence while Amy transmitted a final warning message to Earth Command. The explosion that destroyed Blackwood Station was visible from several light years away. The overloading reactor created a burst of energy that temporarily disrupted the dark matter streams in the surrounding area. Several enemy ships were caught in normal space when the disruption occurred and were destroyed by the blast. Jake Morrison and his crew died knowing they had struck the first blow against an enemy that seemed invincible. The destruction of Blackwood Station sent shockwaves throughout human space. Earth Command realized that they were facing an enemy, with technology so advanced that conventional military tactics would be useless. Admiral Russell began planning humanity's response, knowing that the survival of their species depended on finding a way to fight beings who could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself. President Helen Davis sat at the head of the Emergency Council table and looked at the faces of humanity's top military and scientific leaders. The destruction of Blackwood Station had confirmed their worst fears. Humanity was facing an enemy, with technology so advanced that conventional warfare seemed hopeless. The reports from Admiral Russell painted a picture of total galactic conquest by beings who could manipulate reality itself. The intelligence briefing was more disturbing than anyone had imagined. Analysis of the attack on Blackwood Station showed that the enemy had been studying human technology and psychology for months, possibly years. They knew exactly how human systems worked and had planned their attack with perfect precision. Worse still, the enemy seemed capable of reading human thoughts directly, making traditional military secrecy meaningless. Admiral Russell presented his tactical assessment with the grim efficiency of a career military officer. Every conventional weapon in the human arsenal was useless against an enemy that could phase through solid matter at will. Nuclear missiles passed harmlessly through enemy ships. Energy weapons had no effect on targets that existed partially outside normal space. Even ramming attacks failed because the enemy vessels could become intangible whenever physical contact was attempted. Dr. Sandra Wells had been waiting for this moment for 20 years. As the lead scientist of the classified Phoenix Project, she had been developing humanity's most dangerous and experimental technology in secret facilities hidden throughout the solar system. The Phoenix Project had been humanity's attempt to unlock the secrets of dark matter manipulation, based on theories that most scientists had considered impossible. Sandra explained to the council that her research team had achieved limited success in manipulating dark matter streams. They had built prototype engines that could tap into the energy of dark matter itself, providing power levels that dwarfed fusion reactors. The problem was that the technology was incredibly unstable and dangerous. Early test flights had resulted in explosions that destroyed entire moons. The Phoenix Project had been classified at the highest levels because the potential for disaster was so great. Dark matter engines that malfunctioned could create black holes, tear holes in space-time, or trigger reactions that could destroy entire star systems. Previous attempts to weaponize the technology had been abandoned after a test facility on Europa had been erased from existence, taking half the moon with it. General Chris Martinez listened to Sandra's presentation and realized that humanity had reached a point where desperate measures were their only option. The enemy had already demonstrated that they could eliminate entire civilizations without warning. Earth itself was probably already targeted for conquest or destruction. If humanity was going to survive, they needed weapons that could match the enemy's impossible technology. The plan that emerged from the Emergency Council session was audacious beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. Operation Nightfall would convert 12 of humanity's largest warships into dark matter dreadnoughts, equipped with experimental weapons that could theoretically fight the enemy on equal terms. The risks were enormous, but conventional warfare had already proven completely ineffective. Commander Jake Morrison's final message from Blackwood Station had provided crucial intelligence about enemy weaknesses. The reactor overload that destroyed the station had temporarily disrupted dark matter streams in the surrounding area, forcing several enemy ships into normal space where they could be destroyed. This suggested that sufficiently powerful energy discharges could interfere with the enemy's phasing ability. Sandra's team worked around the clock to solve the stability problems that had plagued dark matter technology for decades. The breakthrough came when they realized that human consciousness itself could be used to stabilize dark matter reactions. The quantum effects of human thought patterns could provide the control mechanisms needed to prevent catastrophic failures. The cost was that crews operating dark matter systems would be permanently changed by the experience. The conversion of the first dreadnought began in the shipyards of Mars. The UHS Leviathan was humanity's newest and most powerful warship, but even it required massive modifications to accommodate dark matter systems. The ship's entire power grid was replaced with dark matter conduits. Weapon systems were rebuilt from the ground up, using principles that challenged everything humans thought they knew about physics. Dr. Lisa Grant had survived the destruction of Blackwood Station by being off-duty when the attack occurred. Her knowledge of enemy behavior patterns made her invaluable to the Phoenix Project. Lisa worked with Sandra's team to design weapons that could disrupt the enemy's ability to phase between dimensions. The key was creating energy fields that could extend into dark matter space itself. The first test of a dark matter weapon system nearly ended in disaster. The prototype cannon created an energy beam that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, but the power requirements were so enormous that it drained the test facility's reactor within seconds. Worse, the beam continued to exist for several minutes after the weapon was shut down, cutting a canyon across the surface of the test moon. Admiral Russell realized that humanity needed more than just better weapons to survive. The enemy had demonstrated strategic thinking and coordination that suggested a single controlling intelligence. Human forces would need to match that level of coordination while adapting to combat in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Traditional military doctrine would have to be completely rewritten. The selection process for dreadnought crews was unlike anything in military history. Candidates had to demonstrate not just technical skill and courage, but also the mental flexibility to operate in an environment where normal physics did not apply. Psychological testing revealed that certain personality types were better able to cope with the reality distortions caused by dark matter exposure. Captain Ryan Clark was selected to command the first operational dark matter dreadnought. His background in experimental physics and combat experience made him an ideal candidate to bridge the gap between theoretical science and practical warfare. Ryan understood that he and his crew would be guinea pigs in humanity's most dangerous experiment, but he also knew they might be the species' only hope for survival. The Phoenix Project facilities worked at maximum capacity to produce the systems needed for Operation Nightfall. Every human colony contributed resources and personnel to the effort. Asteroid mines provided exotic materials needed for dark matter conduits. Research stations shared data that had been classified for decades. The entire human race mobilized for what everyone understood might be their final battle. Intelligence reports from the few surviving monitoring stations painted a grim picture of enemy movements. The mysterious fleet was systematically eliminating every trace of galactic civilization. Star systems that had been home to billions of beings were now completely silent. The enemy was not just conquering the galaxy, they were sterilizing it of all intelligent life. Sandra made a discovery that changed everything about humanity's understanding of the enemy. Analysis of energy patterns from destroyed alien civilizations showed that the attackers were not simply killing their victims. The consciousness and life force of entire species was being harvested and absorbed into the enemy collective. The galaxy was silent because billions of minds had been enslaved and integrated into a single terrifying intelligence. The implications of this discovery were staggering. The enemy was not just technologically superior, they were collecting the knowledge and experience of every species they conquered. With each victory, they became smarter, stronger, and more dangerous. Humanity was not just fighting for survival, they were fighting to prevent their own minds from being added to an ever-growing collective consciousness. President Davis authorized the final phase of Operation Nightfall with the full knowledge that success might be worse than failure. Dark matter technology would change the crews of the Dreadnoughts in ways that could not be predicted or reversed. They might win the war only to discover that humanity itself had been fundamentally altered by the weapons they used to achieve victory. The 12 Dreadnoughts of Operation Nightfall represented humanity's greatest achievement and greatest risk. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy planets, but also enough instability to accidentally tear holes in reality itself. The crews who operated these vessels would exist partially outside normal space, forever changed by their exposure to forces that human minds were never meant to comprehend. As the final preparations for Operation Nightfall neared completion, long-range sensors detected massive enemy formations approaching the outer colonies of human space. The time for preparation was ending. Soon, humanity would discover whether their desperate gamble with dark matter technology could save them from an enemy that had already conquered the galaxy. Captain Ryan Clark stood on the bridge of the UHS Leviathan and felt reality shift around him as the dark matter engines came online. The first operational dark matter dreadnought was unlike any vessel that humanity had ever built. The ship existed, partially in normal space and partially in the dark matter dimension that the enemy used for their attacks. Ryan and his crew were no longer entirely human. They had been changed by their exposure to forces that existed beyond normal physics. Initial test flights of the Leviathan had revealed disturbing side effects that no one had anticipated. Crew members reported seeing things that were not there, experiencing memories that belonged to other people, and hearing voices speaking in languages that did not exist. Time itself seemed to flow differently aboard the ship. Minutes could stretch into hours, or entire days could pass in what felt like seconds. Dr. Eric Thompson studied the medical reports from the Leviathan's crew with growing concern. Prolonged exposure to dark matter was changing human biology at the cellular level. DNA was being rewritten by quantum forces that science barely understood. Some crew members were developing abilities that seemed almost supernatural. Enhanced reflexes, the ability to sense objects in dark matter space, and most disturbing of all, limited telepathic contact with the enemy collective consciousness. The second and third dreadnoughts, UHS Phantom and UHS Nemesis, completed their test flights with similar results. Each ship could phase between normal space and dark matter space, with increasing skill, becoming nearly invisible to conventional sensors. Their weapons could strike targets across multiple dimensions simultaneously. But the cost was becoming clear. The crews were losing their humanity one piece at a time. Admiral Russell made the difficult decision to launch a preemptive strike against an enemy staging area before all 12 dreadnoughts were ready. Intelligence reports showed a massive enemy fleet gathering in the ruins of what had been Zephyrian space. If humanity waited much longer, the enemy would be too strong to defeat even with dark matter weapons. The battle that followed was unlike anything in human military history. 3 dark matter dreadnoughts faced an enemy fleet of over 200 vessels in a combat zone that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Traditional tactics were meaningless when ships could phase in and out of existence at will. The fight became a deadly game of dimensional hide-and-seek with weapons that could destroy reality itself. Captain Kate Sullivan commanded the UHS Nemesis in humanity's first major engagement with the enemy fleet. Her ship phased through normal space like a ghost, appearing just long enough to fire devastating volleys before disappearing back into dark matter space. But the enemy adapted quickly to human tactics, using their superior knowledge of dark matter manipulation to set traps that caught human ships between dimensions. The true horror of the enemy became clear during the battle. The alien vessels were not simply ships. They were living constructs made from the harvested consciousness of conquered species. Each enemy vessel contained thousands of enslaved minds, forced to serve the collective intelligence that had absorbed their individual identities. The ships themselves were powered by the life force of entire civilizations. Ryan Clark discovered that his connection to dark matter space allowed him limited communication with the enslaved consciousness within enemy vessels. The voices he heard were the last desperate thoughts of beings from dozens of different species, all crying out for release from their eternal imprisonment. The enemy had not just conquered the galaxy, they had turned their victims into weapons against their own kind. Lieutenant Amy Carter, now serving aboard the UHS Phantom, made a breakthrough that changed the course of the battle. Her exposure to dark matter had enhanced her natural ability to work with communication systems. She discovered that she could tap directly into the dark matter streams that the enemy used for coordination. For the first time, humanity could intercept and decode enemy communications. The intelligence that Amy gathered from the enemy communication network was more terrifying than anyone had imagined. The attacking fleet was just the advance guard of a force that numbered in the millions of ships. The enemy had been systematically harvesting the consciousness of every intelligent species in the galaxy for thousands of years. Earth was next on their list, and they had already begun the process of evaluating human minds for integration into their collective. Dr. Sandra Wells analyzed the data from the first major engagement and realized that humanity's dark matter weapons were more effective than anyone had dared hope. The Dreadnoughts had destroyed dozens of enemy vessels, but more importantly, they had begun to disrupt the collective consciousness that controlled the enemy fleet. Each destroyed ship released thousands of enslaved minds back into the universe. The enemy responded to humanity's success with escalated attacks on human colonies throughout the Outer Rim. Unlike their previous surgical strikes, these new attacks were brutal and overwhelming. Enemy fleets appeared simultaneously at dozens of human worlds, beginning the harvesting process that would add human consciousness to their collective. Billions of human lives hung in the balance as the remaining dreadnoughts raced to defend as many colonies as possible. Captain Rachel Torres took the UHS Nemesis on a desperate rescue mission to the Zephyrian homeworld. Intelligence reports suggested that some of the alien population might still be alive in harvesting facilities that the enemy had built across the planet's surface. Rachel knew that saving alien survivors was crucial. They might hold the key to understanding how the enemy collective consciousness could be defeated. The Zephyrian homeworld was a nightmare landscape of massive processing centers where the enemy harvested consciousness from still living victims. Rachel and her crew found thousands of Zephyrians trapped in crystalline pods, their minds slowly being drained while their bodies withered away. The sight of an entire civilization being consumed alive filled the human crew with rage and determination. Tikori rescue operation revealed new information about the enemy's methods. The harvesting process took weeks to complete, during which victims remained conscious and aware of what was happening to them. Their individual memories and personalities were slowly absorbed into the collective, but traces of their original selves remained as tortured fragments within the enemy consciousness. Death would have been a mercy compared to this eternal imprisonment. Amy's continued monitoring of enemy communications revealed the scope of the threat facing humanity. The enemy collective had been growing for millions of years, absorbing entire galaxies' worth of intelligent life. What was happening in the Milky Way was just the latest in an endless cycle of conquest and consumption. The collective consciousness had become so vast that it existed partially outside normal space-time, making it nearly impossible to destroy. The psychological toll on the Dreadnought crews continued to mount as they fought battle after battle in dark matter space. Crew members reported increasingly vivid contact with the voices of enslaved alien minds. Some began to show signs of multiple personality disorder as fragments of alien consciousness tried to establish themselves in human minds. The line between human thoughts and alien memories became increasingly blurred. Dr. Thompson's medical team worked frantically to find ways to protect the crews from the mental contamination that came with dark matter exposure. They discovered that strong human emotions, particularly love, hope, and determination, could act as barriers against alien mental intrusion. Crew members who maintained strong connections to their human identity were less likely to be overwhelmed by the voices from the collective. Ryan Clark began experiencing prophetic dreams that showed him possible futures for humanity. In some visions, the dark matter Dreadnoughts succeeded in defeating the enemy, but at the cost of transforming humans into something unrecognizable. In others, humanity was absorbed into the collective consciousness, adding their creativity and determination to an already unstoppable force. Only a few dreams showed outcomes where humanity survived unchanged. The enemy collective began to show signs of adaptation to human tactics. New types of vessels appeared that could exist more fully in normal space, making them less vulnerable to dark matter weapons. More disturbing still, some enemy ships began broadcasting human voices, the consciousness of captured colonists who had already been partially integrated into the collective. Intelligence reports from the few remaining human colonies painted a picture of systematic conquest that was accelerating beyond all projections. The enemy was no longer content to harvest one world at a time. They were beginning the simultaneous processing of entire star systems, using technology that could drain the consciousness from billions of beings at once. Admiral Russell realized that humanity was running out of time. The 12 dreadnoughts of Operation Nightfall were humanity's most powerful weapons, but they were still vastly outnumbered by an enemy that grew stronger with every victory. The final battle for humanity's survival would have to be fought soon, before the enemy collective became too large and powerful to defeat. As the fourth part of humanity's struggle came to an end, the crews of the dark matter dreadnoughts prepared for what they knew would be their final mission. Admiral Russell stood in the command center of the UHS Independence and watched as all 12 dark matter dreadnoughts prepared for humanity's final gamble. The plan was beyond audacious. It was almost insane. The dreadnoughts would phase completely into dark matter space and strike directly at the enemy collective consciousness in a realm where normal physics did not apply. The crews who undertook this mission would be changed forever, assuming they survived at all. Dr. Sandra Wells had finally solved the critical stability problems that had plagued dark matter technology for decades, but the solution came with a terrible cost. The crews of the dreadnoughts would have to surrender their normal human existence and become beings that existed partially outside reality itself. They would gain the power to fight the enemy on equal terms, but they could never return to the human world they were fighting to protect. The transformation process was voluntary, but irreversible. Each crew member had to make the choice, knowing that success would mean sacrificing their humanity to save it. Captain Ryan Clark was the first to undergo the complete transformation, allowing dark matter energy to rewrite his very existence. The process was agonizing, but when it was complete, Ryan could perceive reality across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The enemy collective had not been idle while humanity prepared its final assault. Massive fleets were converging on Earth from across the galaxy, carrying the harvested consciousness of billions of enslaved beings. The collective had grown so vast that it could process entire star systems simultaneously, turning whole worlds into components of its ever-expanding intelligence. Commander Jake Morrison, somehow having survived the destruction of Blackwood Station through circumstances no one fully understood, now commanded the lead dreadnought UHS Voidwalker. His exposure to dark matter energy during the station's destruction had begun his transformation months earlier. Jake existed more in dark matter space than in normal reality, making him the perfect leader for humanity's dimensional assault. The final battle began as the 12 dreadnoughts phased completely out of normal space and entered the dark matter realm where the enemy collective's true form existed. What they found there was beyond human comprehension. A consciousness so vast that it stretched across multiple galaxies, composed of the enslaved minds of countless species that had been harvested over millions of years. The enemy collective consciousness appeared as a living web of thought and energy that connected every dark matter stream in the local galactic cluster. Individual enemy ships were just tiny fragments of this enormous intelligence, puppets controlled by a mind that had consumed entire civilizations. The collective had become so large that it existed partially outside normal space-time, making it seem nearly invincible. Captain Kate Sullivan, commanding the UHS Nemesis, led the first wave of attacks against the collective's control nodes. Her weapons fired streams of concentrated dark matter that could disrupt the quantum connections holding the enslaved consciousness together. Each successful hit freed thousands of alien minds from their eternal imprisonment, but also triggered massive retaliation from the collective. The battle in dark matter space defied all conventional understanding of warfare. Ships could exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Weapons could travel backward through time to strike targets before they were fired, and the battlefield itself was composed of living thought that responded to the mental state of the combatants. Human crews had to learn entirely new forms of combat while fighting for the survival of their species. Lieutenant Amy Carter, now serving as communications officer aboard the UHS Phantom, discovered that her enhanced abilities allowed her to communicate directly with the enslaved consciousness within the collective. She began broadcasting messages of hope and resistance to the trapped minds, encouraging them to fight against their captors from within. The response was immediate and powerful as millions of enslaved beings began to resist their integration. The collective consciousness reacted to this internal rebellion with confusion and rage. For millions of years, no harvested species had ever shown the ability to resist integration once the process was complete. The human concept of individual free will was something that the collective had never encountered, and it proved to be a virus that spread rapidly through the enslaved minds. Dr. Eric Thompson, monitoring the battle from Earth, detected massive disruptions in dark matter streams throughout the galaxy. The fighting in dark matter space was having effects that reached across vast distances, freeing enslaved consciousness and disrupting enemy control networks. For the first time in months, communications were being received from alien civilizations that had been thought completely destroyed. Captain Rachel Torres made a horrifying discovery during the battle. The enemy collective was not just one intelligence. It was composed of layer upon layer of harvested civilizations, each one enslaved and forced to serve the layer above it. At the center was something that might have once been a single species, but had become so twisted by eons of consuming other minds that it was no longer recognizable as anything that had ever lived. The truth about the enemy's origin was more disturbing than anyone had imagined. Millions of years ago, a species not unlike humanity had discovered dark matter manipulation technology, but instead of using it responsibly, they had become addicted to the power of absorbing other consciousness. They had consumed their own galaxy and then spread to others, becoming a plague of living thought that devoured everything it touched. Jake Morrison realized that the only way to defeat the collective was to strike at its very core, where the original controlling intelligence still existed. But reaching that core meant penetrating layers of enslaved consciousness, each one more desperate and hostile than the last. The human dreadnoughts would have to fight their way through the screaming minds of billions of victims to reach their target. The assault on the collective's core began with all 12 dreadnoughts concentrating their fire on a single point in the enemy's vast consciousness network. Their dark matter weapons tore through layers of enslaved minds, each successful penetration freeing countless beings from eternal torment. But the deeper they went, the more desperate the collective's defenses became. Captain Kate Sullivan made the ultimate sacrifice when her ship's dark matter core began to destabilize under the collective's counterattack. Instead of trying to save her vessel, she deliberately overloaded the core while deep within the enemy's central consciousness. The explosion created a cascade failure that began to tear the collective apart from within, but it cost Kate and her entire crew their existence across all dimensions. The chain reaction that Kate's sacrifice triggered spread throughout the collective consciousness like a virus of freedom. Enslaved minds that had been trapped for millions of years suddenly found themselves able to think independently again. The shock of liberation was so powerful that it disrupted the quantum connections holding the collective together. Amy Carter, now functioning as much as a psychic operative as a communications officer, coordinated with the newly freed alien consciousness to turn the collective's own power against itself. Civilizations that had been forced to serve as weapons for their captors now used their knowledge to help humanity destroy the intelligence that had enslaved them. The final moments of the battle took place in a realm beyond physical space, where thought and reality were the same thing. Jake Morrison led the surviving Dreadnoughts in a direct assault on the original controlling intelligence at the heart of the collective. What they found there was a consciousness so old and twisted that it had forgotten its own origins, existing only to consume and control. The destruction of the original intelligence was not accomplished through weapons, but through an act of pure human will. Jake Morrison and the crews of the remaining Dreadnoughts surrounded the ancient enemy consciousness and simply refused to allow it to continue existing. Their combined determination, powered by dark matter energy and enhanced by the support of billions of freed minds, was enough to finally end the threat that had plagued the galaxy for millions of years. As the collective consciousness collapsed, communications networks throughout the galaxy suddenly came back to life. The Zephyrian Empire, the Corvan Republic, even the hostile Vex swarm, all had survived in hidden enclaves and resistance movements. The galaxy that had seemed dead was very much alive and ready to rebuild after its long nightmare. The surviving crews of the dark matter Dreadnoughts found themselves forever changed by their experiences. They existed partially outside normal space-time, serving as eternal guardians against threats that might emerge from the dark matter realm. They were no longer fully human, but they had saved humanity and every other species in the galaxy. Admiral Russell addressed the first post-war Galactic Council from the bridge of the UHS Independence. Representatives from dozens of species that had been thought extinct joined the meeting via quantum communication links. The galaxy that had gone silent was now more united than it had ever been, bound together by their shared experience of survival against impossible odds. The dark matter Dreadnoughts continued their patrol of the cosmic void,